So tonight I wanted to ask a question, but I don't think too many people will know the answer to this. I wonder if you recall what you were doing on the afternoon of November the 13th, 1982. Yeah, that may be hard to recall what you were doing on November the 13th in 1982, but actually, remarkably, I'm constantly misplacing stuff. I remember what I was doing on November the 13th, 1982, because I was a freshman at Penn, and I was at Philadelphia's Franklin Field, where my Penn Quakers were playing the Harvard Crimson for the Ivy League football title. Now, Penn was an excellent basketball team. However, it had not won an Ivy League title in football since 1959. And I think the previous 3 years, they'd managed to win one game. But I showed up and they started winning. Now, I don't know if that's cause and effect, but anyway, that's what happened. And there were 35,000 in attendance. It was a pretty large crowd for that day. And of course, wouldn't you know it, Penn was up 20-0 as the fourth quarter started. It's in the bag, right? Until, of course, Harvard scored 3 quick touchdowns, and suddenly it scores 21-20. And there were 2 minutes left in the contest, and Penn had one final chance, and they moved steadily down the field. I've actually been able to rewatch this in recent years on YouTube. And Penn had a kicker. They drove into field goal range, and the kicker, who was a Jewish kid, by the way, named Schulman, and with 3 seconds remaining on what was going to be the last play of the game, he lined up to decide the title, right? If it was good, Penn won. If it lost, Harvard won. And the kick had the distance, but it was wide left. And let me tell you something. You could just feel the air go out of the 35,000 people's mouths in that stadium crowd. But a funny thing happened in the moments that followed, because a penalty was called on Harvard for running into the kicker. And they didn't have instant replay in those days. You know, the call stood. And that meant Penn had another try. And this time, the kick went right through. And you know what happens next. Everybody storms the field. And then you tear down the goalposts. And if you know how the city's laid out, you carry the goalposts out of the stadium to the bridge over 30th Street, and you throw them in the Schuylkill River. And I happened to be in Philadelphia, in the area I was serving about 45 minutes north of Philadelphia, and I actually asked somebody, I said, whatever happened to those goalposts? And he said, they're still there. I said, they're still there? They never brought them out, apparently, so I'm told. So every year for the last several years, I mean, I wasn't directly involved, only indirectly, but I do recite a special al-Chet. For the sin I've sinned before you, O Lord, by polluting your Schuylkill River with goalposts. But my point here is not just to prove that I'm a football junkie, because although that is true, but because it is a fitting metaphor for the second chances that we are afforded by Yom Kippur. After all, what's the word for sin? The word for sin is chet. Chet means, they taught us this in seminary, right? Chet means to aim at a target and to miss the target, either by not having the correct distance or by not having the correct angle and you miss wide. How about that? But what would happen on Yom Kippur, right, if suddenly somebody said, it's okay, we're going to give you another chance to hit the target? And all the disappointment and upset, you have a chance to make it right. So I want to show you some examples in life when we think everything here didn't work out, everything here's failed me. And then you find out, not necessarily so. Hope didn't go away. So I'm going to guess, I'm pretty sure I'm right on this one, that you can't look down one of the long aisles in this synagogue and find a couple who, for one reason or another, I'm not distinguishing, it doesn't matter to me, is on a second marriage. Guarantee you can't find it. There are all kinds of reasons. So I want to tell you about a couple that I had the pleasure to have in my congregation when I was in New Orleans, Louisiana. And both of them had been widowed in midlife. And they got together and they were married the first time I was there in the early 90s. And guess what? I came back in 2022 and there they were. There they were. She well into her 80s and he above 90. And it took enormous courage, I would say, to start over again, but they did. And the results are so spectacular. Let me just tell you why I think they're very special people and how they strengthen each other. Fortunately, he was a very successful businessman. The husband was a very successful businessman, and he's become a very, very fine philanthropist. The kind of person where you look up on the building, his name's on the building. You go into a wall in the JCC, and there's his name there. You go to the Jewish organization, say, we really have to honor this couple. We already honored them. I went to every organization, they already honored them. Same response all the time. But here's the remarkable part. We had every year, they have a lovely program through the conservative movement. Hopefully we send some kids, I don't know. It's called USY on Wheels. Maybe some of you went on it. Maybe your children went on it. It goes all over the country. And one of the stops in USY on Wheels is New Orleans, Louisiana. And the kids, it's one of their favorite stops for many reasons, including we have a kosher establishment that makes kosher versions of all the unkosher foods that New Orleanians enjoy, and they're really good. So you can have gumbo, you can have jambalaya, you can even have fake shrimp. True. And we needed volunteers. We needed volunteers to help serve the kids and help them out. And our office manager, Sarah, young woman, called this couple and they came. And they did a great job. But the next day, I went to her and I said, Sarah, look, I'm happy they came. They didn't seem put out. They had a very fine attitude. But is it really right to call people with their names on buildings and walls and people who've been honored by every Jewish organization and people who are in their 80s and 90s? Is this the kind of volunteers? Are we that desperate for volunteers? And she said to me, you don't understand something. This is what they as a couple want to do. This is what they as a couple want to do. This is how they as a couple want to spend some of their time, assisting others. How many philanthropists do you know who serve 16-year-old USY kids? Yeah, that's my list too. But it's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. They've had 32 years of marriage to each other and been absolutely one of the most remarkable couples I've ever seen. The second example I want to offer you is closely related to the first, is my own rabbinic career. And I was in Olney, as many of you know, for 3 years during the pandemic, during COVID. And I didn't know where I'm going next. It was a temporary position. And it was tough. It was tough. I was already pushing 60, which I've now hit. And I thought, well, maybe this end. They're done with me. But it didn't end. Not only didn't it end, I went back to the same place I started my career. How about that? It's a heck of a story, right? You've got Michael J. Fox and that Back to the Future franchise and Jennifer Garner and 13 Going on 30. Or if you like raunchy comedy, Hot Tub Time Machine. Don't tell anyone I liked it, but I loved it, okay? But the last years in New Orleans, getting to go back to a place at a very different stage of life is an extraordinary experience. There's nothing like it. There's no way to describe how that feels. There's no way to explain the profound satisfaction. Okay, there was an endowment, there was a bequest given by a couple who were Holocaust survivors. And in my first stint in the early 90s, there were many Holocaust survivors in New Orleans. They called themselves New Americans. Second stint, there were 2 left, but there was a bequest. And the bequest was to put up a monument in the cemetery where many of them are interred. And the bequest was never spent. The bequest was sitting in a bank account. And one of my dear friends of the congregation from 30 years ago, she said, you knew all these people, including the donors, and you knew all their friends, and all those people interred in that cemetery deserve to have this monument, and you knew them all. They were your neighbors, and they were your friends, and they helped you out when you were a much younger colleague. Let's get this done, and I'll help you, and we'll get it done. We got it done. Very satisfying. And that's what second chances do for you. You have the wisdom you didn't have the first time. And sometimes you even have more opportunity too. But the third I want to argue, and I want to leave this, is that the events in the state of Israel, I hope, are a wake-up call for all of us on many levels. On many levels. So I just want to tell you that there was a Zoom call. I have so many, I forgot which one this was, to tell you the truth. But one of the speakers was concerned about the following. He said, I don't necessarily care if American Jews have a little bit different view than some of us, the same view as some of us. I'm worried that they've gone from junior partner to silent partner. And we can't allow that to happen, because then the voices you want strengthened are not strengthened. You need to give strength, you need to give chizuk to those voices with your money, of course, with your time, with your presence, better yet, and yes, with your opinions as well. I'll share one that I shared very openly, and I know it's a big subject of disagreement in Israel, but for me, it's easy. For me, it's easy. Which should take priority? I made no bones about this. Which should take priority? The prosecution of the war or the rescue of our hostages? Okay, you can all try it out, but I had a very easy answer. The rescue of the hostages. You know why? Because my love for our brothers and sisters in the state of Israel exceeds my hatred for their enemies. It's as easy as that. Bring them home isn't a slogan. Bring them home is a priority. Not everyone in Israel agrees with that, and that's okay. That's fine. Master Michael Oren said his own kids disagree on this. One holding one position, one holding another. But I didn't want to be silent. I wanted to say what I thought was important, and I urge you to do the same if you want your opinion to hold sway. So, every now and again, you get a second chance in so many different ways. You get a chance to a redo. You get a chance tonight and in the day which follows to take all the things that didn't quite land from the past year, and this time to really make this count, to really score. And to continue my metaphor, when the Almighty gives you a second chance, you better put it between the uprights. Gemar Tov.